Hey everyone, DevTube episode 4 here, and today I'm talking about Visual Studio 2010, and I'm gonna show some of the new features introduced in it, and I'm just gonna generally talk about it. Well, let's start with the very beginning, the installation. The installation process is very similar to what was in Visual Studio 2008. And actually, if you ever installed one of the express editions of Visual Studio of the component parts, the installation process looks just like that. So, what comes in the package that's new in Visual Studio 2010? Well, first of all, the MSDN documentation is organized a bit differently. First of all, you do not install it from the auto-run window like you did in Visual Studio 2008, and it's installed actually after the installation of Visual Studio 2010. So once you install Visual Studio 2010, you have the option to install documentation. So that's where you can pick books to install. That's how it's called now, books. So you can pick books for Visual C Sharp, Visual Basic, for Visual F Sharp, .NET Framework. Yeah, so you just select the component parts of the documentation you actually want there. Now, uh, another interesting part about this is that Visual Studio documentation, or MSDN in this case, can be updated later on from local sources like DVDs or the hard drive, or from an online resource if such available. Well, in this case, this would be MSDN. Uh, MVC2 is coming to Visual Studio 2010 right out of the box. Silverlight 3 SDK is also included. Windows Azure development facilities are also integrated in Visual Studio 2010, and Office 2010 development tools are also there. Now, Visual F Sharp is a component part of Visual Studio 2010 now. So there are four languages integrated now. There are Visual C Sharp, Visual F Sharp, Visual Basic, and Visual C++ over there. So uh, one of the uh, key parts about Visual Studio 2010 is that it heavily relies on WPF, the Windows Presentation Foundation, and so there were introduced some performance improvements. If you've ever developed WPF applications, you'll see that. So as you see, the whole start page is a bit redesigned. The Visual Studio logo, all this kind of stuff. So the WinForms application, I'm going to start a WinForms application made in C Sharp. Uh, the structure is pretty much the same. There's the same toolbox, Server Explorer, data sources, and all this kind of stuff. The code editor, the text in the code editor looks a little bit cleaner, I would say. It's like smooth because it's WPF improvements, and Visual Studio was built using WPF. So it's one of the interesting features. Now the components in the toolbox got a version change. So if previously you've used version 2.0 components, now the Windows Forms controls are version 4.0, all of them. And I mentioned there's the chart control here. There wasn't, at least in my toolbox, for a while. But yeah. And there is this new feature called IntelliTrace that's integrated in Visual Studio 2010 Ultimate Edition, not in other editions as far as I know. But what it is, it's real-time debugging, and it helps catching situations that are not reproducible later. So let's. I'm just gonna show you. So I have some sample code here, like part of the code that just says the text showing a message box, and a part of the code that's just gonna throw an exception. So I'm just gonna put some breakpoints over here for each of them, and I'm gonna run the application. It's nothing special. So I'm pressing the button. I see the IntelliTrace window here. I'm pressing the button. Okay, and you see the events are actually tracked, like what happened. Uh, the breakpoints are not necessarily introduced, so it tracks the stuff even without breakpoints. So continuing with it. Okay, it shows the message box, but now it hits the exception. So, okay, there's the exception. and I can go through each event here and see where it is. I can see the locals for this. I can see the call stack for each, for the user actions, for the breakpoints, for everything. I can, so in case some situation appears that it is hard to reproduce, either because you don't know the conditions of that situation or you don't know what action was performed, you can always track it down with IntelliTrace. So that's one part that's introduced in Visual Studio 2010, and it's quite interesting to use. Now let's go to the WPF. So actually, if you take a look here, there's no more start page listed in this list as you've seen it before in Visual Studio 2008. To go to the start page when you're working on a project, there is a start page button on top here, right here. So you can open it from here, and then I'm just going to go to my WPF test application. The editor and all the code window, there's all very familiar if you've ever developed WPF applications. There's one new tab here, the document outline. It's going to show you the outline of the document. It's set by default here. The outline of the document structure, and whenever you mouse over a item here, you can see the control on the right being rendered in a separate box to show you what it looks like in the application. So it's a neat feature. Some performance improvements in WPF, some they're looking really good. What I like is, at least in my case, the editor is not that slow as it was before in Visual Studio 2008, so this is quite enjoyable, but generally it looks pretty much the same. So Visual Studio 2010 is available for MSDN subscribers now. If you have a TechNet subscription, it's also there. If you have a DreamSpark subscription or DreamSpark account, you can get the professional edition of Visual Studio 2010 for free. It's for students. And if you have a MSDN AA account or Academic Alliance, you can also get it there for free. Now, the versioning for Visual Studio 2010 changed a bit. So first of all, there is no more Team System, Team Suite, all this kind of stuff. There are three major versions: the Visual Studio 2010 Ultimate, Visual Studio 2010 Premium, and Visual Studio 2010 Professional. So Premium and Professional is what developers should look for if they used Visual Studio 2008 Professional before. The Ultimate Edition is the analog of Visual Studio 2008 Team System, Team Suite, and all that edition. There's also the Express editions that are free, that are available at Microsoft.com/express, and they are free, but you obviously won't get some specific sets of features that you can get in other versions of Visual Studio 2010. And as I mentioned, IntelliTrace that I showed is only available at this point in Visual Studio 2010 Ultimate. So if you need this feature, you would probably want to check this version out. So this is pretty much all of the general highlights I would like to make about Visual Studio 2010, at least those that are kind of important to me. And I will show you one more thing. It's about a new project. You can target more frameworks now, starting from 2.0 right here, and go into 3.0, 3.5, 4, and you can actually add frameworks like, for example, you want to develop for 1.1, so you just go here and add it. So as you see here, there's MVC, as I talked about, Silverlight, Azure, and for Office stuff. There's Visual F#, the Silverlight, tutorial, library, and application. So yeah, thanks for watching DevTube episode 4. You can catch me on Twitter at twitter.com/DennisCode, or you can catch me on my website, dennisdell.com. And thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on my next episode.